The stench was so bad, neighbors called police days after a Detroit man's death. But the odor wasn't coming from his body. That was already in a Detroit area funeral home being prepared for burial. The stink was coming from something else, and it was in the basement. This is Michigan Crime Stories. Michigan Crime Stories is a podcast that explores murder, mysteries, and mayhem in the Mitten State.
Criminal behavior has always enthralled us. It's when societies determine what is and isn't allowed.
We assume heinous crimes are committed by monsters, individuals we dehumanize in an effort to make sense of their deeds.
Their victims sometimes seem distant, just faded names in a passing headline.
But the terrifying truth is that crimes are committed by ordinary people, just like you and me.
And many of those crimes happen right in our own backyards.
My name is Gus Burns.
And I'm Darcy Moran.
We're reporters for MLive.com and your hosts for Michigan Crime Stories.
This episode is titled Cellar Swine. This is Darcy Moran with Michigan Crime Stories, and I'm here with Gus Burns and Khalil Al-Hajjal. So Gus, can we just start out, how on earth did you first hear about this story?
If I recall, we were sitting in our office, and Khalil was there too. But we had a small office in Detroit in a building, and all of a sudden it was about 5 or 6 o'clock on a Friday. And usually at that time, you really are not wanting a new breaking story to come through. But I don't know exactly how I heard about it, but we've heard that there was a huge hog in the basement of a house in Detroit. And you always get weird stories, but this is like the type of story that I really eat up, you know, when you got something crazy.
That was a really bad choice of words.
I think it was a great choice.
But then, so yeah, I mean, basically, at first I think we just knew it was a hog, and then it came out that there had been reports from neighbors that this hog was being fed people. And you hear like a hog in a basement, and it takes you to like, you start thinking about some of these crazy pig stories that are both true and in movies. You think of the one we covered last year for Michigan Crime Stories. John Counts did it, where there were 2 hunters from the Metro Detroit area went up to hunt near Mayo, Michigan, and they got into a fight with some locals at a bar, and they vanished. And then years later, it came out that these people had told others that they had killed them and then actually fed them to some pigs. So that's like one of the many examples of weird pig-eating stories we've heard of.
But here's the thing, I didn't realize this is like a thing. This is
my favorite part of the story is Darcy's complete unfamiliarity with it. And so it was brand new shock for her. It was just sort of this...
Were you aware that this is a thing that pigs supposedly eat people?
Well, it's sort of a common TV and film trope.
But I think like the biggest one is probably Hannibal, because it was a sequel, it was a prequel, but it came out after Silence of the Lambs, so it already had that fame. And then in that movie, there was a scene where they fed someone to the pigs.
Oh, they feed someone to the pigs in that. Okay, I was unaware.
It's I think in a number of gangster movies use that. And then there's the movie Snatch. There's a famous scene in the movie Snatch where there's some mobster type figure explains how you go about getting rid of a body, and that the best way to do it is to feed them to the pigs. There's a Western TV show on HBO called Deadwood, where pretty much every other episode, someone's being thrown in the pig pen to hide the body.
It sort of makes you wonder like how tasty people must be.
Oh my God, that's not what I think of at all. Okay, well, for goodness sake, on that note, let's dive into the narration here.
An awful odor emanated from the house owned by Gary Roquemore, a Detroit man who died on June 22, 2015, at age 61. But most neighbors had no clue it was an animal in the basement causing it. When Roquemore died, he left behind piles of garbage, several blighted homes, a small commercial warehouse in the Detroit enclave of Highland Park, and 2 enormous hogs. The first hog was found in the basement of Roquemore's Orange Lawn Street home, located in a blighted neighborhood on the city's west side. It weighed nearly 500 pounds. Some neighbors described the pig owner, who once ran for a seat on the county commission, as an eccentric hoarder. Another neighbor described him as, quote, a good man, who was introverted and hated to see anything go to waste. Either way, his property looked like a junkyard. Here's retired Detroit Assistant Police Chief Stephen Dolant, who responded to the Roquemore house after the head of animal control let him know this might be a bigger deal than first suspected.
Well, then he gets out there, and I get a phone call saying, you need to come out here. Because supposedly, the guy who had the pig in the basement was picking up prostitutes, killing them, and feeding them to the pig. I'm like, what? So I got out there, and they're like, yeah, there's a big pig in the basement, and there's this pickup truck over there, and there's all these purses in there, and we think that this pig ate these prostitutes. What are you talking about? Pigs don't eat prostitutes. They eat everything but, I think, the hair or something.
There was also a mysterious smell coming from the man's pickup that was left parked in the street.
So I said, did you check the truck yet? No, we haven't checked the truck yet. And I went over the truck, and it reeked. I thought, oh, my God. I was like a dead body in there. Oh, no, this is going to be terrible. And they said, what are we going to do? And I said, did anyone check it? And they said, no. I said, give me a pair of gloves. You're going to check it? Yeah. So I ripped off the tarp, and just raw meat, old meat. I don't know if he was feeding the pig or what, but whatever. So we go to the backyard of his house. And sure enough, there's this pig in the basement, and there's no stairs. So the pig couldn't get out, and it was filthy.
The ex-assistant chief said the bed of the pig owner's pickup was filled with maggot-covered rotting meat. Where the meat came from, nobody knows. Dolan speculated it was possibly picked up at a local restaurant that planned to throw it out. Based on the appearance, police determined it was not human flesh. As for the purses, Dolan said there was no accompanying IDs. While it couldn't be 100% ruled out that they belonged to missing prostitutes, Dolan said there was absolutely no evidence to support that theory. At the time of the hog's discovery, he theorized that neighbors made the morbid claims in order to expedite police response and the hog's removal. No one did figure out exactly why Roquemore kept the hog penned in the basement with no stairs. Maybe he was raising it for meat, or using it as a biological garbage disposal. Maybe it was part of his collection of things. Maybe it was a friend. 3 days later, another hog, this one only about 300 pounds, was discovered in a nondescript cinder-block commercial building Roquemore owned about 5 miles away. The building appeared to be used for more junk and storage. Melissa Borden helped with the rescue and rehoming of both pigs, which she identified as Yorkshire feeder hogs.
I run the Devoted Barn, which is a program of Devoted Friends Animal Society, and we take in any kind of animal from an extreme cruelty or neglect situation or completely feral.
No one told her about the prostitute diet theory until she arrived.
So we pulled up, and the first officer I walked up to said, "The cadaver dog's just finished. You're clear to go." And I'm sure I gave him a very funny look because he's like, "They didn't tell you about that?" And I'm like, no, they didn't tell me that detail. But the cadaver dogs didn't hit on anything, so that was a false rumor. So she had never eaten dead humans, dead prostitutes. I mean, pigs, they say, will eat anything, almost everything. But no, I don't believe that rumor was true.
In all, it took 5 hours to get the pig out. Borden said they had to blow a hole in the side of the house and build a ramp to rescue the hog, now named Sunshine. Borden felt the name was appropriate, since the pig had lived in a dark basement for so long. The second pig rescued from Roquemore's warehouse was named Parker.
But she's living a great life now. We actually opened up a sanctuary, and so they are residents of our sanctuary. They overlook our lake. Their enclosures overlook our lake, and it's beautiful. They're doing fantastic.
While kept captive in the basement, neighbors told Borden that Roquemore fed the malnourished pigs bags of garbage and didn't provide a regular clean water source. Since their rescue, the pigs have both been eating much better. No garbage and no human flesh. They're now up to nearly 1,000 pounds each, Borden said. And based on a Yorkshire hog's lifespan at 8 years old, they're believed to be in the twilight of their lives.
So I want to say for the record that I've decided after this that when I die, I'd like my body to be fed to pigs.
No. Khalil, no.
But so like my grandchildren could each be given one limb, and they could each, with a prayer, toss the limb into the pig pen. And it'll be like, it's a more intense way of saying goodbye, and I think it'll be,
No.
I think that's the way to go.
I don't think your wife would appreciate that. I just don't.
I'll have to run it by her.
Okay. Well, so this is just a weird story on so many levels, and I want to go back. It was the neighbors that introduced this idea?
Yeah, I don't think, when I talked to Assistant Chief at the time, Dolan, he didn't seem to, over the phone, believe for a second that this pig had eaten prostitutes. I remember him telling me, I think it was just something that was made up by neighbors because they had this going on for a while now, and they knew he had passed away, and they knew something was up with that house, and they wanted it cleaned up and taken care of. So someone must have figured out there was a pig in the basement, so then they used that to kind of lure police to come do something about it.
But how would that, why would that be the first thing in your mind? Why would you be like, I want them to come get this pig. I should say that prostitutes were involved and they've been eaten.
I think some of it might have to do with some kind of neighborhood lore. They had, originally I thought a lot of the women's clothing was in the basement, but when Dolan spoke to me for this story, he indicated it was in the pickup. So basically people knew this guy's pickup. They knew something was going on in his house because there was so much stuff in it and it smelled. And then they see all these articles of women's clothing, and then I don't know if it became a rumor from that or what, but that's what it ended up as.
Did they really not test the meat that they found in the pickup truck?
No, I asked him about it, and he made it seem like we concluded that this was totally untrue, and I asked him, take a little further, how did you conclude that? And as far as the meat, I said, did you test it? How do you know it wasn't human flesh? And he said basically it was simply from the observation of it that they deduced it wasn't human flesh. And I said, well, how do you know that these articles of clothing didn't belong to missing women? And all he said to that was, we can't verify or deny that. All we know is there were no IDs and there was nothing connecting the clothing to missing women.
And no, family members of missing women came forward being we know this guy.
No. Since we re-looked at this, I sent a FOIA request to Detroit Police because I'm curious, did they have any ideas? What exactly did they have? I'm hoping I'll get a full list, and if there were IDs, we'll definitely check and see if any of these match up with possible missing persons. But the other thing you have when you have a missing person who is a prostitute, a lot of times they don't have a lot of family who's tracking them anyway. So who knows? Detroit has a lot of missing people who have never been found.
Well, the other thing that sort of lends a little credibility to the idea that it could have happened that way is, why would this guy keep that pig down there? There's no fathomable. It wasn't his pet. He obviously had no affection for this pig. He left him in 2 feet of his own feces in a basement with no stairs.
Yeah, some people said they had heard that he kept other farm animals like chickens, and he had he told people that he had a little farm outside of town. So maybe he was just into farming, but I've heard other people say, well, maybe it was a guard pig, because who's going to go into his house? He's got a huge pig in there. But you're right. That's the baffling thing, is it clearly was not his pig. Unless he just went over and said, oh, hi, Mr. Oinky, and then threw it a bag of garbage.
Oh, my God. But, I don't know. The whole idea of hoarding, though, is that there's something going on, and, that doesn't seem healthy or right for the person involved. So I don't want to get too hung up on the person here. We don't honestly know his story that much. It's just these really odd aspects of it that neighbors would ever allege that anyone would ever bring up this idea. And it kind of goes, for me, back to just the weird things that we hear on the scanner or, elsewhere, tips that come in that end up being completely unfounded, but we just never know.
And as far as him, I looked into his police record, at least within Wayne County and the district court, he didn't have anything that would reflect that he was doing anything but occasionally driving without proof of insurance.
And it seemed like neighbors had some good things to say about him.
Yeah, he ran for county commissioner and lost. And he has if you look his name up on YouTube, there are quite a number of videos that he made just talking about different issues in Detroit. And so, if you watch those videos, he wasn't the most charismatic speaker in his videos, but you would never have thought this guy's got a huge pig that he feeds garbage to in his basement.
Well, on that note, no. I guess, has this stuck with you guys? I mean, you guys, for having originally been together, working together when it came out, is this one that you think back to as one of the weirder calls you get?
All the time. This is one that I tell story. I tell the story to family members. This is one that I always remember and think about, and because of all the weird factors here.
And because apparently pigs leave no evidence of a person, which is all brand new information to me.
Right. And I think what stuck with me was that this was a quick story. It was a hitter on Friday, and then there was a follow-up on Monday when they found the second hog in his warehouse in Highland Park. And then I think we did a follow-up on what happened with the pigs. But a lot of the main questions, like, okay, well, there's women's clothing. Where did it come from? Why is it there? And why is this pig there in the first place? I feel like it didn't necessarily feel like there was this huge, thorough investigation to either prove or disprove the rumor. So that's why it always stuck with me. Like, what if it was true?
All right, well, guys, thanks so much for making this city girl scared of pigs. I appreciate you guys telling this story today. And Khalil, thank you very much for joining us.
Sure.
Thank you.
Good time.
This is Darcy Moran.
This is Gus Burns.
And this is Michigan Crime Stories. Audio editing for this episode was done by Tanya Magellas, and music was done by John Counts.
I'd like to say thank you to the people who spoke to me for this story, including former Assistant Chief Stephen Dolan, Melissa Borden of the Devoted Barn, and the several neighbors who were kind enough to be interviewed by me. Thanks for listening, and if you have any tips, you can contact me at fburns@mlive.com. That's FBURNS@mlive.com. I'm Gus Burns, and this is Michigan Crime Stories.